I'd like to invite our panelists for the keynote panel to come up. Farnam Jahanian from National Science Foundation, Matt Erskine from the Economic Development Administration, and Bryan Sivak from Health and Human Services. I'm going to introduce each of our speakers and then turn to some questions. Before I do that, I'd like to reflect a little bit on the role government's played and why we are here today. You heard me quote Bob Metcalf saying that we are the application explorers of the 21st century, very much like he was one of the explorers back in the 90s. You heard Susan Crawford last night say that we're at a transition point comparable, the milestone point comparable to the move from no phone to phone. You also heard Rick McGeer talk about the fact that Genie today is a lot like NSFNet, circa 1985. The fact is government support has played a vital role in incubating new ideas for a long time. These ideas are harvested by the private sector, sometimes many years later, creating jobs and economic development. A recent report published by the National Research Council, you may know it as the Tire Tracks report, which I'd recommend reading. It's a government advisory group, looked at 8 computing technologies, including ones we're well familiar with, like microprocessors and broadband mobile, tracing the government-financed research into commercialization. It calculated the portion of revenue at 30 well-known corporations that could be traced back to the seed research backed by government agencies. That total was $500 billion just for those 30 companies. So with that, I'd love to introduce Dr. Jahanian, who serves as the National Science Foundation Assistant Director for the Computer and Information Science and Engineering Directorate, or SISE. Farnam guides SISE in its mission to uphold the nation's leadership in scientific discovery and engineering innovation. He's also professor in electrical engineering and computer science at the University of Michigan. Farnam, thank you very much for joining us today. And I should say, he has played a critical role in the establishment and the success of US Ignite. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Bill, and congratulations on a great year for US Ignite. Since you mentioned I'm on the faculty also at the University of Michigan and a big Detroit Red Wings fan, congratulations to the Blackhawks. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning and to share the stage with my colleagues, Bryan and Matt. I think we all recognize that we're at the center of an ongoing societal transformation. The explosive growth of scientific, social data, wireless connectivity at broadband speed for potentially billions of endpoint devices, pervasive deployment of sensors, and seamless access to computational resources and application in the cloud are transforming the way we work, the way we live, learn, play, conduct business, and of course communicate. Consider for a moment what happens in an internet minute. Over 200 million email messages are sent. Over 2 million search queries are conducted. 30 hours of video uploaded, including 1.3 million video views. And I know my teenage kids contribute significantly to that number. 47,000 app downloads, which may actually be even a conservative number. 100,000 new tweets. 700,000 Facebook status updates, for example. Perhaps what's most striking, folks, is that today the number of network devices is equal to the global population of Earth. By 2015, the number of network devices will be twice the global population. Think about it. In less than 3 years, 2 to 3 years, it'll be twice the number of the population of Earth. Which brings us actually to US Ignite and to this event today. As it was mentioned already, just about a year ago, almost to the day, the Office of Science and Technology Policy and the National Science Foundation, working with a group of thought leaders from the private sector and academia, many of them are actually with us today in this room, helped establish the US Ignite initiative. With this initiative, we collectively sought to enable the next generation gigabit-capable network at national scale, in hopes of bringing researchers, students, entrepreneurs, innovators to unleash a revolution in ultra-high-speed networking, and also to catalyze next-generation open-source application and services on future networks. As many of you know, the National Science Foundation has a long history of creating and cultivating innovative ideas that lead to advancements that touch and shape our lives and contribute to our economic well-being. In case of US Ignite, by partnering with a number of mission agencies that are represented here today, we've sought to facilitate the research and development of new gigabit applications, digital experience, and services that potentially transform all areas of national priorities, including advanced manufacturing, education, workforce development, emergency preparedness, energy, sustainability, healthcare, transportation, and the list goes on and on. More specifically, in the last year, the US Ignite initiative has leveraged the federal government's long-standing investment in research in all areas, in wireless networking, in software-defined networks, in data analytics, and so on and so on. A notable example, as it was mentioned, is the National Science Foundation funded Global Environment for Networking Innovations, or GENI, which is essentially a programmable virtual laboratory or testbed, if you will, for internet-scale experimentation. You get your own slice of the internet, if you will. GENI has laid the technical foundation for and allowing us essentially to stitch together islands of broadband in highly innovative universities and cities, and to create a national testbed for distributing content, for enabling real-time communication and collaboration in very unique and creative ways, as you will hear about for the remainder of this event. These applications showcase the possibilities of next-generation networks at national scale. Consider all the cities that are involved in these experiments. Chattanooga, Tennessee, Lafayette, Louisiana, Cleveland, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Chicago, of course, was mentioned, Kansas City, the great work that's taking place in the state of Utah. Small cities that are represented here, including Red Wing, Minnesota, Amon, Idaho, and this morning I found out, in fact, Dublin, Ohio, just a couple of 100 miles from where I live. And through the Mozilla Ignite Challenge, our partners at the Mozilla Foundations have grown and nurtured a new community of application designers and developers. These developers, these applications, I should say, give us a glimpse into how we might catalyze the innovation ecosystem to develop the next generation applications and services, again, with enormous potential societal benefits. And these apps are the result of exceptional public-private partnerships spanning, of course, designers and developers, university research and students, entrepreneurs, and visionaries across the entire country. Indeed, throughout the day today and tomorrow, you'll see how these activities and investments over the last year are coming to bear in the form of exciting new demonstrations of new applications and services across many sectors of our economy. Just imagine for a moment the possibilities. Imagine a day such that by integrating medical and scientific data, imagery, and video through high bandwidth, robust, and seamless connectivity, you can rapidly and precisely identify the onset of diseases, unwanted drug interaction, potential clinical intervention. You can improve the quality of life through personalized healthcare, something we've been talking about for a long time, and assistive technologies enabled in part by robust, usable, and trustworthy wearable devices integrated and networked with the environment. Imagine that by coupling roadway sensors, traffic cameras, and individual GPS devices, you can reduce traffic congestion and generate significant savings in time and fuel costs. And that is actually being done in LA today. Imagine a day where static infrastructure, such as buildings and bridges, are transformed into smart spaces that adapt to consumption, growth, and changing environmental needs. Imagine by connecting weather radar and other sensor data to ultra-high-speed networks, you can actually more accurately predict natural disasters such as hurricanes and tornadoes and facilitate life-saving and preventative measures that potentially mitigate their impact. And finally, imagine what's happening in the education sector, in universities in K through 12. Imagine by integrating emerging technologies such as MOOCs, real-time simulations, and other rich media content with knowledge from research about how people learn, we can transform formal and informal education. And folks, that is absolutely happening. These are just a few examples, representative examples of the kind of scientific discoveries, engineering innovations, and societal benefits that are possible. They offer a very compelling vision of the future. As I wrap up, the work that we're doing here through US Ignite is helping lay the foundation or the groundwork for new enterprises, promote economic growth, improve our citizens' quality of life, and fortify the foundation for US competitiveness for decades to come. On that note, before I close, I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of those who have enabled such fantastic progress and have been instrumental in making today's event possible. In particular, I want to thank, of course, our partners here at US Ignite for this public-private partnership, Bill's leadership, Glenn Reichart, Sue Spradley, and the entire US Ignite partnership staff and board of directors. I also want to thank our friends at Mozilla Foundation, Ben Moskowitz, who's here, and Will Barkus for all the work that they have done, who've helped nurture this community. And finally, I want to thank all of you, all the colleagues from across the public and private sectors who have spent the last year devising new apps, providing access to data, information, and other resources, nurturing this community that's growing, including all the folks from state and local governments that are here. As Alan Kay, a noted computer scientist, once said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And through this partnership, you are indeed inventing the future. Thank you very much, and congratulations on all your successes.
Thank you very much, Farnam. It's my pleasure now to introduce Matt Erskine, who serves as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development for the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Matt was appointed Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Chief Operating Officer in September 2011. Before joining the Obama administration, he was Senior Vice President at the Greater Washington Board of Trade and Executive Director of the Greater Washington Initiative, a public-private regional and economic development effort that has helped position the Washington region as a premier business destination. As a resident of Washington, I can attest that this has been a very successful effort. Thank you very much, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you all. And Bill, I want to thank you very much and all of you for the opportunity to be here for this important dialogue and forum. You know, since US Ignite was launched last year at the White House, the tremendous strides that you've made in fostering the creation of the next generation internet applications that really are helping to boost and advance American competitiveness, truly impressive. And I congratulate you on your success. And I do look forward to the discussions today, discussions that are going to move this forward even faster and create more success in your important mission. And of course, I'm pleased to join my colleagues here on the stage, Farnam and Bryan, and I appreciate their partnership and leadership and service. And I want to take just a moment to introduce another important person who's with us today, and that's our Chicago Regional Office Director, Jeanette Tamayo. Jeanette? At the U.S. Department of Commerce and at the Economic Development Administration, we have 6 regional offices, and Chicago is one of them. Covers several states, and we're delighted that Jeanette could be with us today. You know, as someone who comes from the private sector, but also has done economic development, commerce, and trade at the state, regional, and federal level, I know that the work that US Ignite and all of you are doing to create the next generation technologies is absolutely critical to our nation's competitiveness. Innovation in ultra-fast networks, big data, local cloud computing, and programmable networks translates to high-skill, high-wage jobs and competitive advantage. Today, I want to focus my remarks on how the Obama administration is working to support and grow the critical regional economic ecosystems that spur innovation by bringing the private sector, companies, educational institutions, and municipalities together to create the best possible climate for innovation. Effective regional economic ecosystems, and I saw earlier, Bill, the use of the US Ignite ecosystem, which I think is such an apt term. Regional economic ecosystems leverage the ideas, the physical and human infrastructure, capital, both human and financial, magnifying the connectivity, speed, and robustness of business. But first, I want to provide some context before I get into those details. You know, the economic landscape we all face today is like none that we have faced before. We are presented with two concurrent macro trends. First, the U.S. is on the cusp of a resurgence in business investment, particularly due to the manufacturing sector. This is due to the continued increases in the productivity of American workers, strong rule of law and intellectual property protection, reliable supply chains, new opportunities created by the expansion and reliability of domestic energy resources, and the rising costs abroad. In sum, the U.S. has a strong advantage when considering the total enterprise cost-benefit equation. Many global manufacturers are looking to come back, to expand operations here, or to start investing in the United States for the first time. Now, while the factors that I just mentioned are promising, and while our national competitiveness, our national comparative advantages, rather, are promising, a number of issues need to be addressed at the local level across the U.S. to ensure that our regions are positioned to attract and expand that investment and to make that investment lasting. Today, communities must position themselves to compete in this new economy, this new landscape. And those regions and communities that are best able to align, strengthen, and leverage the assets with the needs of investors will attract and expand that investment. However, many communities are not fully prepared to take advantage of these new investment opportunities. For example, many mid-sized communities are struggling to reorient their local economy to attract the new manufacturing facilities and supply chain firms after the dislocation and the structural imbalances of the past decades. And many of these communities have limited local resources. And that's the second macro trend we're facing. Just at this time of great opportunity and national overall comparative advantage, states and communities who may be in a slightly better fiscal position than they were 2 or 3 years ago still have significant resource gaps. General fund spending levels are expected to increase by only 2.2% this fiscal year, less than their historical average growth rate. And even with that revenue growth, state budgets are still facing pressure, with 24 states enacting lower spending levels in fiscal 2013 than in fiscal 2008. Now, what this means is that state and local governments, who are at the forefront of developing regional economic strategies to address the key investment needs in their economies, don't have the resources to make the critical investments at a time when the need is more urgent than ever. And of course, exacerbating the situation, private capital remains extremely risk-averse, tied up due to risk factors that permit only the strongest investment opportunities to be funded without some risk mitigation. So there's great opportunity, but there's also great need for resources. And there's a very big resource gap, which means that no one can go it alone anymore to achieve economic development success and to drive this innovation. And the old models of innovation and economic development will prove insufficient for the critical outcomes we need. The simple fact remains that if the U.S. is to maintain global leadership, our country must compete successfully for the major global investment in the years ahead for a national net gain. And to do this, it is crucial that the U.S. invest in its industrial ecosystem, build the public goods needed to provide that productive ecosystem. Such public goods can strengthen the capacity for innovation in manufacturing in U.S. communities, deepen the skills of the American workforce, attract and support small businesses that serve as suppliers, and expand opportunities for U.S. exports. A recently released report called the MIT Production and the Innovation Economy states, one objective is most urgent, rebuilding the industrial ecosystem with new capabilities that many firms of all kinds could draw on when they try to bring their new ideas into products in the market. We, MIT, saw the holes in the industrial ecosystem as the single most challenging obstacle to creating and sustaining production capabilities in the U.S. that enable innovation to come to market. Holes might be less picturesquely described as market failures. And the researchers of this report concluded that creating public goods in this innovation ecosystem would be the approach most likely to pay the greatest dividends to the U.S. economy, but that these public goods are not being generated by the market. And so, together, the partnerships with the federal government that can and should play a key role in this, helping to invest the patient capital in a strategic way in the ecosystem, leveraging state, local, private, not-for-profit, and philanthropic dollars, leveraging those funds and facilitating the reorientation of these local ecosystems toward productive investments. And Commerce's and EDA's important contribution here involves setting the stage for economic growth, sustainable job creation, and prosperity through the economic development co-investment with communities. Following some key principles, which I like to call the 4 C's: a competitive process which seeks out the best ideas across the country, a process where we co-invest with local and regional partners, a process that fosters and rewards collaboration, and a process that catalyzes the sustainable long-term job creation, private investment, and economic growth. And they must follow 4 key objectives: leverage scarce resources, drive greater impact on the ground, attain a better return for the taxpayer dollar, and make it a more seamless process for our stakeholders to access the federal resources. Bill had mentioned, and our other speakers have mentioned, several examples, including many states, Ohio, Utah. EDA has been involved in terms of co-investing for innovation in this technology space. In Ogden, Utah, where we did a grant to train workers and provide space for business startups in the growing field of software applications for mobile devices. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Tulsa Community Supercomputer that will leverage the public-private partnerships to enable research, attract top-tier talent, capture federal research funding, and develop the region's workforce. And here in the Midwest, a public-private partnership where we delivered a $4.5 million grant to help small and medium-sized manufacturers compete through the National Digital Engineering and Manufacturing Consortium, which is developing software, purchases time on supercomputers, and trains the small and medium-sized manufacturers in the use of this technology, enabling them to design their own advanced manufacturing processes and products. Working in close collaboration with the OEM customers of these companies, supply chain partners across Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. Now, to support these ecosystems further, the Obama administration has also improved how federal resources can be applied across these programs, because oftentimes, despite the need for communities to establish concerted strategic plans, they find themselves applying for disparate federal programs across a myriad of agencies under divergent requirements, authorities, and focuses, which is why the Obama administration is focused on synchronizing federal programs to maximize federal taxpayer returns, but also enable communities as they develop and implement their long-term plans. And just over the last 4 years, Commerce and EDA launched and awarded funding for 4 multi-agency competitions, including the Energy Regional Innovation Cluster Project in Philadelphia, and 3 of our Jobs and Innovation Accelerator Challenges, together providing approximately $200 million to a total of 44 leading projects nationwide. And this year, our Make It in America Challenge seeks to encourage foreign and domestic businesses to build or expand their operations here in the United States, partnering with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the U.S. Department of Labor, and other federal partners. And we're also leading the President's Investing in Manufacturing Community Partnership to support the locally developed strategies to attract and grow business investment in advanced manufacturing, fostering the long-term economic and job growth. This Investing in Manufacturing Communities partnership will support and reward communities that, 1, recognize their comparative advantages and develop an implementation-ready plan, 2, invest in the public goods, hard and soft infrastructure, through the public and private funding, and encourage community links that reinforce and expand their commercial appeal to investors. And finally, our I-6 Challenge, a multi-agency grant that encourages and rewards the innovative, groundbreaking ideas that accelerate technology commercialization, new venture formation, and new business starts. A great example of the results of our I-6 Challenge can be found in Kansas City, where the Innovation Center at the University of Missouri, Kansas City is using a $1 million I-6 investment to create a digital sandbox to create new products for commercialization, advancing the clustering of the digital innovation development into a central hub and provide the needed technology infrastructure. These national challenge programs spotlight the administration's commitment to driving innovation and growing our vital advanced manufacturing sector, which is such a critical jobs generator for America's middle class. So to conclude, we have these two concurrent macroeconomic trends impacting our country, our regions, and our communities. Great opportunity, but great need for partnerships and new models for innovation and economic development success. No one can go it alone, which is why the mission and the work of US Ignite is so important, bringing together the partners to drive this innovation and to leverage the scarce resources that we're all faced with in this new economic reality. Because the American economy that we always talk about is really a collection of local and regional economies and partnerships. And we know in our hearts and minds that when those partnerships are strong and where our regions are strong, America as a whole is stronger. And President Obama and all of us at Commerce and EDA understand this, and we strongly believe that when the right partners in regional economies come together and increase their level of interaction, good things happen for innovation, job creation, increased investment, and improved prosperity. So going forward, you have my commitment that Commerce and EDA will continue to help regions, to help partners like you across the country thrive in this new economic reality by collaborating closely to support your locally developed plans and to continue to strengthen and build the new partnerships and new models to drive our overall economic competitiveness. So let's work together to make the best possible choices and to advance the smartest policies and approaches to economic development. Thank you again very much. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Matt. At this point, I'm honored to introduce Bryan Sivak. Bryan joined Health and Human Services as the Chief Technology Officer in July 2011. In this role, he's responsible for helping HHS leadership harness the power of data, technology, and innovation to improve the health and welfare of the nation. Not a small task, in the least. Previously, Bryan served as Chief Innovation Officer to Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, where he led Maryland's efforts to embed concepts of innovation into the DNA of state government. Bryan, welcome.
Morning, everybody. As you heard, my name is Bryan Sivak. I actually have two titles at HHS. First one is Chief Technology Officer, but the second one is Entrepreneur in Residence, which is, I think, my favorite part of the title. Because I'm actually a software entrepreneur who sort of accidentally ended up in government through various twists of fate. A lot of people have asked me over the past few years why I did that. And the answer is actually relatively straightforward. As a software entrepreneur, these days in particular, I think many of my fellow software entrepreneurs will agree with this statement, disruption is sort of in our blood, right? We like things that have the potential to cause massive and systemic changes that drive value in all of these different ecosystems. And government is one of the most interesting places to do that, both internally and externally, given the reach and the breadth of what government does. So healthcare, from that particular perspective, is actually really interesting. We're in this incredibly critical moment of transformation in health and healthcare in this country. And we kind of have to be. It's a $2.8 trillion ecosystem right now. That's 18% of our GDP. And it's only growing. It's growing slower than it has in recent years, but it's still growing. So this number is getting bigger and bigger, which is an indication that we've got to do something or else healthcare is going to eat our entire economy. Now, if there's one thing I can say after being in this job for about a year, it's that this ecosystem is absolutely ripe for disruption. And it's starting to happen. One of the things that I look for when I look at industries that are ready or have been disrupted is when people who don't know anything about the industry or the ecosystem itself jump in to actually do interesting things. So if you look at Skype and its disruption of telephony, PayPal and its disruption of financial services, Amazon and its disruption of retail markets, none of those folks actually had a background in telephony, in retail, or in financial services. And in a lot of ways, they were able to do what they did because they didn't know what they didn't know, right? They weren't afraid of what challenges lie ahead because they perhaps weren't aware of all of those challenges. Healthcare is one of those fields, right? And so just two really quick examples. There's a company up in New York called Aiden. And these guys have a really interesting story. Basically, the two co-founders had separate but equivalent experiences. They had loved ones, family members, who went into the hospital for outpatient surgery. And when they came out, they had to go into post-acute care facilities, just to places to live for a week or two to recover from surgery and things like that. So when their family members left the hospital, they were handed literally a photocopied sheet of paper that had 30 post-acute care facilities on it, the name, the address, and the phone number, and that was it. And so they did what anybody would do in that situation. They found the one that was geographically closest to where they lived, that was the most convenient, and they put their family members in these places. In both of their cases, it turned out that these were bad decisions. Both of the choices that they made, these facilities had a history of significant problems, including over-medication, and both of their family members, and thank God they're okay today, but they both experienced some pretty bad stuff as a result of this. Now, what these two guys realized was that this was a terrible way to make a decision about where to put a family member in a post-acute care facility. And so they also then recognized that there were tons of resources out there, both data that we provided at HHS and external data sources that allowed them to build a new web app, both for consumer use to help people select the right post-acute care facility for their family, but also for internal hospital use, for discharge planners to actually help people pick the right place. And so by simply thinking, seeing a problem and thinking about something that happened to them and realizing that there were changes that could be made, they were able to put together a system that actually can help thousands and thousands and thousands of people make better decisions. So that's one example. Another quick example is a company in California called Mango Health. One of the biggest problems in healthcare today is this idea of drug adherence and compliance. Basically, when you get a prescription, it turns out that a lot of people, first of all, don't fill that prescription. And if they do fill that prescription, they then actually forget or don't take all of the meds in that prescription. And the problem is that causes all kinds of problems. Readmissions into hospitals, relapses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's estimated to cost $200 billion a year, right? Which is a big problem. And again, the founder of Mango Health had a similar experience, a personal experience with a family member who didn't take all of their meds and had a problem with that. And he realized that he's a video game designer. He realized that his background in game design could be leveraged to actually gamify this process of prescription adherence and compliance, and he started a company around it. So this disruption is happening, right? Now, once you start to understand, so we have this law, which you guys probably heard of. It's called the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. It's this little law. And it's, pretty comprehensive. But what's interesting to me is that once you start to understand it, and once you look at certain sections of this law, it's actually pretty interesting because it does start to encourage disruption in the healthcare space from a lot of different perspectives. The best known piece of this law that we've all been hearing a lot about lately is this thing called the health insurance marketplace, or the various state and federal marketplaces that you're going to be able to use starting October 1st to actually purchase coverage in healthcare. So here's an interesting potential side effect of this. It's estimated that right now in this country, in certain geographic areas and in certain specialties, we already have a shortage of doctors. So the question is, what's going to happen when potentially 50 million more people suddenly have access to affordable care? It's hard to imagine how that problem is not going to be exacerbated without something happening. Now, this is where, obviously, something like telemedicine can come into play, right? And there are already basic examples of telemedicine happening in the United States. One of my colleagues, Pam Hyde, who's the administrator for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at HHS, was just up in Alaska, and she told me a story about how Alaskan residents are getting mental health services provided by doctors in Minnesota, mental health practitioners in Minnesota through telemedicine. A few months ago, I was out at UC Davis in California, and they have a brand new, shiny, state-of-the-art, pretty amazing telemedicine facility, which in addition to containing sort of the regular remote diagnosis and consult type facilities, also has some pretty cool stuff. They have these dummies that are incredibly lifelike. They bleed and they do all kinds of other bodily excretion things, but you can actually do remote surgeries on these dummies to actually practice some of the techniques that you'll need to actually do real surgery on a real person. And then a few months ago, I saw a demo of a robot that is actually in part created by the iRobot guys, the ones that make the robotic vacuum cleaners, that's actually meant for clinical care in hospitals. And the cool thing about that device, or this big piece of equipment, is that they're able to get incredibly high-def audio and video with low latency by over relatively slow connections. And they're able to do that through some pretty clever compression algorithms and various other things like that. But what I wonder is, imagine what would happen if these guys didn't have to worry about those bandwidth constraints, right? If none of these people had to worry about bandwidth constraints and they could focus on making the experience that much more real and that much more personal. So telemedicine is one obvious example where this stuff is really valuable and potentially game-changing. But there are many others. Take massive data sets. So President Obama recently announced the BRAIN Initiative, which some of you guys might have heard of. This is the effort to basically map the activity of the human brain within 10 years. It's estimated that mapping the activity of a single human brain will require 300,000 petabytes of storage. And just for like some kind of reference, a petabyte is 1,000,000 gigabytes, okay? And that's for one brain. So it's clear that we're going to need new technologies, new algorithms, new architectures, higher speed networks to achieve the goal that they've set out. And I think this is where everybody in this room and everybody that's a part of this effort comes in. Ultra-high-speed broadband is going to be a critical component of all of the applications and all of the technologies that we can only dream about today, and to be honest, ones that we can't even begin to dream about, things that nobody has even thought of. And while it might be sexy to build the next social networking platform, or maybe figure out how to make 6 or 15-second video clips available to your friends, the thing that really gets me going is figuring out how to solve these massive problems. And healthcare, making health and healthcare better in this country, I think is probably the most massive problem that we can even begin to focus on solving. And so while the efforts that we're going to see today I think are wonderful and amazing, and all of the work that you guys have done has been spectacular, what I'm really looking forward to is seeing what comes next and what ideas you have. And on that note, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you guys very, very much.
Well, thank you very much, Bryan. Appreciate your time. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions each. And I might start with you, Bryan, if that's all right.
Sure.
You'll be seeing this morning, some wonderful connected collaboration focused on telemedicine. And this may be an impossible question to answer in 30 seconds or less, but can you make any recommendations on how to address the reimbursement issue? I know we go to the VA hospital, there's reimbursement for telemedicine. Any tips on how to accelerate that process? I know it's a massively complex process.
Yeah, that's a complicated one. These are all things that we're working on. Like I said, we know that access to care is going to be a big deal, especially as more and more people have access to affordable care. Mm-hmm. And so these are components of the policy that are literally getting looked at every day. Everybody's a little busy right now trying to get through October 1st, so we have about 98 days, I think, now, until the insurance exchanges launch. And then I think we'll get to a little bit more business as usual in terms of trying to figure out a lot of this stuff. But rest assured that it's high on the priority list.
Okay, great. Thank you. Matt, I loved hearing about your 4C approach to economic regional innovation. One of our focus areas has been Flint, Michigan, for US Ignite, where we've been funded by the Mott Foundation to help reinvest in the community. We have worked with NSF to fund Genie Rack, local cloud computing, through Kettering University, and Kettering University has a fabulous student innovation program. They've also, through Mozilla Ignite, our challenge contest, cooperated with Purdue University and San Leandro. So it's a great example of the connections that have been made around the country. Do you have any other specific tips about how they might tap into I-6 or make it in America? What other next steps might you recommend based on the success stories of other communities that you mentioned?
Thanks, Bill. The best way, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Administration, we divide the country into 6 regions, and we have 6 regional offices, and we have field staff that are in the communities working with the local public, private, philanthropic, and not-for-profit partners who are developing the new ideas that have been mentioned and looking for ways in which we might be a partner, whether it's technical assistance or financial resources. So what I would encourage is find out and by all means ask Jeanette and myself later in your particular part of the country the resources that could be available through our field staff. And if EDA can't be a partner, we can certainly help to make the connections. As you said, the connections are crucially important. And then what we have done is with the Harvard Business School and Michael Porter, we've developed a U.S. cluster map, the first countrywide map of innovation clusters across the country that isn't just a static representation of clusters, but rather it indicates both a identification of the clusters that exist, but also clusters that are developing across industry sectors, across different applications, and then a registry of those partners that are currently involved in those. So I encourage you to visit that as well at clustermap.us, and that's going to continue to improve with the interaction with folks like yourself.
Great. Thank you very much. Farnam, how does US Ignite fit within the broader innovation ecosystem? And what other NSF investments might be complementing what we're doing at US Ignite?
Thank you very much for the question. Our economic prosperity and sustained job growth, as Matt alluded to, will depend on an innovation ecosystem that includes universities, includes our graduate students, faculty members, and research labs. It includes scientists and engineers in a very flexible, talent-rich market. It includes the private sector. It includes, of course, integrated and sustainable infrastructure and venture capital market. But what's equally important here is to recognize that you need these public-private partnerships that accelerate progress and adoption. They do really three things. They facilitate transfer of knowledge from lab to practice. They also catalyze new innovations based on existing technologies and innovations that we have. And finally, the pull side of it. They accelerate adoption of these technologies. And I think this is a very unique role for US Ignite and similar public-private partnerships, of course. And the success that we've seen over the last year clearly suggests this is exactly the kind of investment we need to make in our economy. With respect to NSF's investment, let me just briefly mention, many of you are aware of a number of initiatives, administration initiatives that the SCI's director, the National Science Foundation, are actively involved in, and in some cases we lead them. You've heard about the Big Data Initiative jointly with the OSTP folks. We launched it with almost every agency that's involved in R&D in high tech. The National Robotics Initiative, the program we have called Smart Health and Connected Health, and again is a program that directly relates to some of the work that's US Ignite is sponsoring. Significant investment in advanced manufacturing, and significant investment in all areas of science and engineering, but in particular with respect to US Ignite in areas having to do with computing, communication, information technology, and related applications. I know we're running out of time, but I want to acknowledge two people
Sure.
that have done so much from the government side to make US Ignite, not only to launch it, but also to make it successful. Nick Menard from OSTP, stand up. I saw you over there. You can't hide. And my partner, Susie Iacono at the National Science Foundation. Without whom this would not be possible.
I concur 100%. Thank you very much, Farnam, Matt, and Bryan. We really appreciate your commitment of time to be here with us today. And each one of these gentlemen will be here throughout a large part of the day, so feel free to ask them further questions over lunch or during some of the demos that they will be introducing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.